Hello, everyone. Happy to meet you all through Product School webinar. My name is Jagadish, and today we're going to talk about why is system design very important for product managers and how can product managers equip themselves with a better understanding of system design concepts. So these are the key topics we are looking to cover today. As I said, we'll talk about why is system design important to product managers. In this section, we also cover like what is system design and an example of system design as well. Then we'll talk about what is the level of system design depth needed for a PM. Again, this is a very subjective question, but we will cover a couple of common scenarios and then discuss how deep a product manager should go in understanding system design. And finally, we'll also talk about how to be successful, the system design part of product manager interviews. A lot of tech companies have system design interviews for rounds for product managers. And I just wanted to share my understanding of how to prepare for a system design interview and what are some of the things to keep in mind when preparing for those interviews. So who is this talk for? PMs who work with engineering teams. That's pretty much any product manager in a technology landscape or company. PMs who drive early stage products because that's when the system design evolves and PM has a part to play there and influence system design thinking. PMs who represent their product and team in broader forums. So as a PM, you become the spokesperson for the product and you represent your product in broader forums. You don't want to be, coming across as someone who doesn't understand the inner workings of the product. So it gives a much more confident picture so PM is able to talk about system design and how the product functions in addition to the business context for the product. And finally, aspiring PMs who want to prepare for interviews, particularly the system design part of the interviews. So I firmly believe that product managers can benefit from understanding what the design of their system is, and they can have effective conversations with engineering and other partners if they have a very good understanding of the design of their system. Before we jump into the topics, I wanted to share a little bit about me as well. I've been in the technology industry for close to 16 years now. Started as a software engineer, then became a business analyst, and then moved into product management. I have some experience building products from the ground up, particularly in the retail and supply chain domain. That's where I spent a lot of my career on. I've worked on manufacturing systems, procurement systems, and buy online, pick up and store systems, and a bunch of other associated retail and supply chain products as well. And I've shared my email address. So please feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn or through email in case you have any questions or any thoughts or any comments after the session. So let's start with what is a system design. There are lots of good definitions available for what constitutes a system design, but I wanted to start with a very, very simple definition that we all can agree on, which is the basic building blocks for any system. We used to call it the client tier and the web tier, or the web server, app server, database, front end, middle tier, back end, however you want to call it, right? Each system has certain basic blocks that the system is built upon. So understanding of all those blocks, what is the role of each block in the system? Is it there for storage? Is it there for processing requests? Is it there for, channeling or distributing requests across a bunch of servers? Whatever it is, right? What is the role of each block in the system? How each block interacts with each other, because this is the fundamental concept in a distributed system that lets each system scale. Each block is not a standalone unit, but a lot of interactions happen between these blocks. And every block is expected to get some input and then give some output. It could be the input could be, okay, I'm getting a bunch of data. I store that in a table or in file storage and then send a confirmation that the storage is successful. Or it could be I get a bunch of requests, and as a load balancer, I'm expected to route those requests to servers which have capacity and then acknowledge that routing is successful and then send the response back to the client whenever I hear back from the server, whatever it is, right? Understanding the input and output of each block actually gives us a better understanding of the overall system. Okay, now that we have talked about what system design is, let's look at an example of how a system design looks like. This is from one of the courses I took when I was preparing for system design. And this represents the high level design for YouTube. So you have a client, a web server, an app server, then a queue for encoding, decoding videos, then you have databases, and then you have storage. These are like the high level blocks of how YouTube functions. I wanted to focus on a couple of things here. One is how the interaction between the blocks have been represented here. And as you can see, each block interacts with one or more blocks to effectively drive the system forward. The second thing is how we talk about the high level use cases. For example, here, the critical use cases for YouTube are I upload a video, I search for a video, and I watch a video. Of course, we have so many other use cases, like say I add a comment or I delete a comment, I like a video, unlike a video, share a video. There are so many other use cases, but you want to start with the most basic and fundamental use cases for why a system exists. So this is how we prepare system design. This is how we understand system design as a PM when we think about how the system operates. And of course, we can go to a lot of detail with respect to, say, for example, the user database, how do we store the data and what kind of partition we use, what kind of database we use. Same thing for like thumbnail storage as well, like what kind of storage we go for. And then what we can represent what kind of caching strategies we use for scaling the system. And for any image or video processing system, we have something called as CDN, which is content delivery networks. So how do we place our CDN servers across the country or across the world so that we can retrieve videos faster? There are so many details we can add to this particular diagram, but I wanted to keep it simple and then talk about how the system design starts and evolves as the system matures. Okay, let's come to one critical aspect of this talk as to why should PMs understand system design. Okay, it's an expectation that a product manager would understand the business and technical aspects of a product. And when I say technical aspects, right, different PMs go to varying levels. I've seen PMs who can actually sit and code in their system to PMs who can understand system design, who can represent it effectively in a conversation, and who are very self-aware of what their technical knowledge is on their system, so they know when to talk and when not to talk. So, but it is an expectation that PMs understand the basic technical aspects of a product. Second thing is, part of being a PM is to have effective trade-off conversations, primarily with engineering, but also with a lot of cross-functional stakeholders. When it comes to engineering conversations, right? Understanding system design, I believe, enables PMs to have effective trade-off conversations. So if an engineer says, you know what, if we have to scale the system, improve the performance, then we will have to go for more CDNs, and the PM can evaluate what is the cost of having more CDNs versus what is the improvement in performance that we are targeting. So is it the right return on investment that I can expect for the cost? So having these technical discussions and trade-off discussions become a lot easier and effective if PMs understand system design. Third thing is for a PM to appreciate their product fully, especially understanding how complex their product is, needs an understanding of the system design for the product. That's when a PM can truly appreciate the complexity that their product serves and also make effective commitments, because now PMs know how complex their product is. And some PMs are even good at saying, okay, if you want a change in this particular area of the product, it is much more complex. than the other areas. So it's going to take longer to land this particular change or this particular request from another stakeholder. So all those commitments become reasonable if PMs understand complexity. Finally, it's about PM's own confidence, right? Like I understand my system thoroughly, and I feel much more confident to represent my system in much broader forums. Again, there are so many reasons, other reasons as well as to why should PMs know system design, but I wanted to highlight a few critical ones that I've seen in my experience as well as to why should PMs understand system design. Okay, talking about the depth needed. Understanding is a subjective term, right? Like how deep should PMs go when it comes to understanding systems? Again, the answer is it depends. So let's unwrap this with a couple of scenarios. Okay, so I am a PM for a customer facing product. Let's say I'm the PM for a weather app. Okay, that's being used by millions of customers across the globe. Okay, now I'm expected and I would prefer to understand the basic blocks of how my system gets the data, processes the data, and then shares the data and shows the data to our customers. Okay. What are the constraints over there? For example, can I give hourly weather forecast for like the next 15 days, or is it restricted to just the next 2 days? Why two? Why not 15? What is the constraint over there? So all these uh, elements help me as a PM make better decisions. In this case, if my goal is to have more premium subscribers, have more adoption for the product throughout the world, and then have more engagement for already existing customers. So understanding all these blocks and the trade-offs will actually help me make effective decisions. And it's entirely the PM's choice to go deeper than this, right? For example, what are the APIs that exist in my products? Can I expose those APIs so other interested developers can build their own versions of the app on top of my APIs? Or how does data storage work? Like, what kind of databases I use and what kind of storage mechanisms, refresh mechanisms I use. How is my database partitioned? How does it scale? So it's entirely up to the PMs to go deep into all of these areas. Okay. The second thing is platform products. These are like, underlying business platforms that I manage. For example, if I am managing the Facebook app, let's say, because there are going to be like tons of PMs who manage Facebook apps. But there are going to be some central platforms that power Facebook, like so the search platform or the payment platform or the ranking algorithm. So if I am a PM for those platforms, I'm going to have other businesses that plug into my platform for specific needs, processing or data needs. Okay. Same is the case with say AWS product managers who build the underlying platforms that power AWS services, let's say. Okay. So in that case, the expectation is to understand the technical aspects in a much deeper way than other PMs, let's say, because you have to understand how the product performs, how the product scales, what are the APIs we use, and how do other businesses call my platform to leverage what is it that I provide. Okay. So long answer short, as I said earlier, it depends on the kind of product, the kind of role, the kind of company that you are in. Okay. So an awareness of what is expected from a PM, and that awareness comes from talking to stakeholders like engineering, business, and infrastructure, all these stakeholders to say where can the PM be most effective, and then figuring out how deep we have to go in order to be effective in a PM role for that particular product and company and scenario. That's what I would recommend in terms of determining how deep a PM should go for system design. Okay, now that we have talked about what is system design, why should PMs know that, and how deep should PMs go, I want to spend some time on how to develop this expertise in system design. Okay, say we all take up new jobs all the time, or we move from one job function to say a PM job function. Okay. it's not always possible to have that expertise right away, which some PMs have because they have been involved with the product from the ground up. So if you are not in one of those scenarios, how to develop these expertise, right? That becomes critical. First thing I would say is understand the basic blocks, like as we saw for the YouTube example previously. We saw that there is a web server, app server, there is a queue, there is an encoder, there is a database, there is a storage, there is a client, there is a CDN. Understanding these blocks and what is the purpose of each of these blocks. Say if I have an encoder, what does the encoder do and what does the encoder not do? Okay, understanding the purpose and constraints for each of these blocks will give a very good idea of how the system functions. Okay. The second thing to focus here is understanding input and output. Again, here it becomes really critical because this will give the PM an idea. Say somebody, we talk about, okay, oh, you know what, this encoding takes a lot of time. Okay, we know where to immediately map that process to the design. Okay, it's with the encoder. And then we can say, okay, encoder takes a queue of all the videos that come in. And then as output, it encodes the video, compresses it, whatever processing has to happen, and then stores it. Okay, then we can really participate in the conversation and also understand most of the things that are being said in the conversation because we clearly know what is the input and what is the output of the component that we are talking about. Okay. The third thing is understanding how a system scales. This becomes critical because for existing systems, oftentimes discussions are around scaling it. And by scaling, I mean, we have like 1 million users, we have to scale it to like say 100 million users going forward because that's the expected load we see in the next 5 years. Or it could be, okay, the performance is not optimal. So how do we improve the performance so that existing users get a better product? Okay, whatever aspect it is, right? Okay, so there are going to be different scaling strategies at different layers. You have like caching or database partitioning or content delivery networks, whatever the scaling strategy we follow for that system. Understanding that becomes important because whenever we run into scaling blockers, we can immediately talk about what do we have for scaling today, and then how can we improve that? Do we need more servers? Do we need more CDNs? Do we need more database capacity? Or should we partition the database in a different way now that we have more users than what we started with? So, I mean, the way I see it is these 3 points are like the starting point for how to understand system design and then participate and understand more as we get involved with the product development process and maintenance processes. Okay, how to prepare for system design interviews. So aspiring PMs or PMs who are already in the field for some time, you go for a job interview. Of course, we have been doing system design for quite some time, but interview prep, I believe, is a different game altogether because two reasons, right? One is you are in a time boxed scenario where you have to like start and end your answer within like say 45 minutes, of which 5 to 10 minutes will go for questions and other discussions. So you have like 30 to 35 minutes to give a well-rounded answer. That's not something which we do in our day-to-day jobs. We discuss, you know, issues and requirements over a period of time, not just in 35 minutes always. Second thing is you usually have discussions with your team on a product that you are very familiar on. Okay. But in an interview, it's going to be with an unknown person and a product or a domain or a scenario which we are completely not familiar with. Okay. So how do we still present an acceptable and a good answer in that scenario? That's where preparation becomes key here, right? Okay. One thing I want to call out is system design questions can be ambiguous. Okay. Mostly it will be ambiguous. Okay. It will be something like, hey, can you design a travel system for this particular company? Or can you design this XYZ app for say a booking app for say an XYZ use case? Okay. It's not going to say, oh, these are the requirements and these are the constraints. So can you build an app for that? It will never be that way, right? Because the interviewer expects you to take a very structured approach into narrowing the scope down, defining success and all that. We'll talk about that in the next bullet. So questions are going to be ambiguous. So we have to be prepared for that. And how can we be prepared for that? Is by having a framework for structuring the answer, right? Okay, so whatever be the question, this is how I'm going to approach giving my answer. So we're going to start with clarifying the requirement. This is where we define the scope. Okay, let's say someone says build a travel system. Okay, a travel system can be anything. It could be flight tickets booking. It could be accommodation booking. It could be like things to do. So there are so many things that can be associated with travel. Are we going to do everything? Then in that case, we may not be utilizing the time in the best way because they're going to be like having a huge scope and not being able to cover all of that in the given time. So it's up to us to define the scope. Okay, when it comes to travel, I can think of three different things like, flight tickets or travel tickets, then accommodation and things to do. And there's a lot of options available for flight tickets and accommodation. So I'm going to focus on how to give the best experience when it comes to booking activities at the desired destination. So that narrows the scope down to a particular area within travel. Then we also have to talk about, okay, when it comes to booking activities, there can be so many types of activities. So you can say, I'm going to focus on XYZ kind of an activity, or I'm going to say, I'm just going to focus on, sports activities and nothing else. Okay, so this, again, you can take it in any direction you want, but make sure you are defining the scope to something that you're comfortable moving forward with the next steps of the design. Okay. The second step I would say is defining success criteria. This is because it's critical for any product, right? Like, what does success look like for this product? Okay. Typically, it could be, getting X number of users within say 6 months, 3, 6, 9, 12 months time frame, or if it is an existing product, increasing engagement within the next 6 months, whatever it is, right? I mean, take a metric and define how success looks like for my product. If I'm building a new app, I'm not going to talk about monetization when I build an app. All I'm going to talk about is how many users download the app, number of app downloads, and what is the engagement level for each user downloading the app. I can say, I want to hit 1 million users in the first 6 months. And I want my users to engage at least once with my app, at least once a day or once a week, depending on the kind of app. Say if it is a social media app, I would say 2 or 3 times a week. I call it good engagement. If it is weather app, I would say once a day is good engagement, whatever it is, right? Okay. Define what success looks like for your product. Okay. And in both of these, it's not that, the interviewee keeps talking about it and then say, this is what I'm going to do, but rather it's about alignment and agreement with the interviewer as well, asking questions like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Does that sound okay to you? And this is how I'm thinking about defining success. Do you agree with that? So having that dialogue and getting that engagement and alignment with the interviewer is critical at this step. Okay. Then I would say create the high level design, the way we saw for the YouTube example, right? Okay. Say these are going to be the basic building blocks for my system. Okay. If I'm thinking about a video streaming platform, okay, I'm going to have a client. It could be a mobile app. It could be a web client. I'm agnostic to that. I'm going to have a client. Then I'm going to have a web server to process all my client requests. Then I'm going to have a video storage, which has all the videos. And I'm going to have some database about who my users are. Then I'm going to have some kind of a video processor that's going to take, say, all incoming videos and then store it. And if there is a request for a video, take a video and then decode it and then put it back to the user. So this forms the basic building blocks for any system. And then talk about the key use cases you're going to focus on. This is something that you would have defined in the requirements as well, right? Okay, if I am building a travel system, I'm going to let my users search for activities, view details about the activities, and then make a booking for activities. These are my three use cases for that particular system. Okay. Step number four, in my opinion, is really, really critical to drive the discussion forward. Okay. Because this is where as someone who has interviewed a lot, this is where I've seen candidates lose track, and then I try to bring them back, and then they don't have enough time to wrap up and finish the interview on a high note. Identify what is critical for the system. Okay. Let's say we are building a social media platform, say like Twitter. Okay. In that case, your news feed or the home screen, the feed is, is the most critical thing that most users are going to engage with, right? Because you're always going to have more people who see the tweets than people who post tweets. Okay. So it's a read heavy system. So start with, or spend a lot of time on what that critical block is. First step is identifying that critical block. Say if it is Instagram, I would say that feed is really critical, and if it is, say, a weather app, I would say how you get the data and how you process the data, because that is the backbone for the weather system. The interface is going to be very simple. I open the app, I see the weather for today. That's the interface. And then I can say, show me for the weekend, show me for next 15 days, whatever it is, right? But the crux of the system is how I get and process the data. Okay. So I'm going to be, I want to be able to identify that very clearly based on the question, and then start detailing my design from that particular point. If it is going to be, say, Dropbox, design Dropbox, your most critical thing is about how you store and how you let people collaborate uh, on the same document. Okay. You don't want to talk about how the user interface looks like, that will take the problem away, the focus away from what is critical to the problem. Okay, so once you identify what is the critical block, start the detailing with that. And again, you can check with the interviewer here. Say, I think this particular block is really critical for the system. So I want to start my detailed design from this, and then I'll expand it to other components. So this way, the interviewer knows how you are thinking. And also, if you don't have time to detail all the components, that's okay, because you have covered the critical components for that system. Okay, that's how you do the detailed design. For example, if it is database, you talk about how do you choose a SQL versus NoSQL database, and how will you partition the database? How will you cache? What kind of caching strategy will you use for caching most used data? And then you'll expand it to other components, right? Okay, here is, and as the next step, you would want to talk about what are the scaling bottlenecks. You're saying, okay, I see bottlenecks in these places. Okay. And then how will you mitigate these bottlenecks or blockers? So I'll put caching here, I'll put CDN here, I'll load balance here. So how do you talk about, mitigating these blockers? Okay. And if you're interested and feeling confident, you can talk about how will you estimate capacity, things like, okay, this is going to be a read heavy system, write heavy system, or read and write going to be equal. So how will you tune your design based on those constraints? And also about, how will you estimate like storage capacity, server capacity, or, caching capacity, infrastructure capacity, network capacity, whatever is applicable to the problem. What are the APIs going to look like? So all these are, depending on time availability, depending on your comfort level, depending on the expectations for the role. So I would recommend tailoring your answer and including all this. And finally, there is a lot of online material available for preparation. You have courses, you have practice forums where you can practice with a peer or sign up to do a mock interview with somebody already in the profession, and tons of YouTube videos available. And all these material personally has helped me in my interviews. So I'm sure you'll be able to find a lot of material for preparation as well. So yeah, that's all I had. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and wishing you all the best. So goodbye. And as I have shared my email earlier, please feel free to send me an email if you have any comments or questions or thoughts, or you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and we can connect further. Thank you so much.